Hi, I'm Rob Price, and I'm talking to CEOs about AI. Welcome to Futurise.
My name's Elan. I'm CEO here at Augury, and Augury is a global industrial AI company serving customers in over 40 countries around the world, across all of the different sectors and subsectors of manufacturing and heavy industry. And I appreciate the chance to be here with you today.
It's brilliant to have you on the conversation, and I'm really interested in this kind of broader, as you say, it kind of manufacturing covers many kind of areas and sub industries, but I'm especially interested in it in the context of agentic because, well, it's a space that's kind of embraced AI and robotics kind of for many, many years. And I'm really interested to understand kind of how the market's embracing agentic around that and that
Mhm.
relationship with IT and OT. So, how about as a start, just kind of expand a bit more in terms of how you've looked at AI and agentic as your own business in serving those industries, and especially over the last maybe 2, 3 years of the arrival of models and how you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So with Augury, what we've done is we've basically re-architected the business to specifically serve the kinds of teams and workers that you're going to find on factory floors, shop floors, and industrial sites all around the world. And these are people that grew up inside of the reliability profession, the maintenance profession, process and operations professions. And what we're thinking about is what kinds of data do these experts and teams need to make better decisions? And how can Augury, with all of the different tools and levers available at its disposal, surface all of that data in a really intuitive way so that these decision makers can beat tight timelines and execute in the best possible way and help their plants and their companies perform more effectively for their own customers. Put simply, we start with the user, that expert who's been on site, who's worked there for years, has all of this aggregated subject matter expertise. And then we work backwards and we think about how AI can serve and amplify the work that they're doing today.
Do you know, as you've taught, I'm reminded of a mate who works in a factory environment and he's health and safety. He's not a technologist. But to see the light switch on with him a year or two into it, when he thought, I can apply this in my world around health and safety of his people, his employees, because that world is not necessarily full of technologists, is it? So if I look at AI and models, those of us that are in the heart of that kind of almost adopted this alien language that
Yep.
can lose people if they're not part of that world.
Yep.
I guess it's really important to be able to speak their language in those roles and those the range of focus areas that they've got.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So I think at the end of the day, AI, just like any other technology, is only as good as its ability to solve problems for the people who are using it, right? There's all of this discussion and debate out in the world and the market about, is AI going to replace people? Is it not going to replace people? I think a lot of the commentary on this front went in one direction, that it's going to replace all of this knowledge work and replace all these jobs and workers. And we at Augury, we just can't be further from that point of view. What we actually believe is that at all of these different sites, the workers are going to be more important than ever. The teams are going to be more important than ever. And with all of the time that we spent at these customer sites, really living and breathing every single day, those customer experiences, those user experiences, and what they're facing, here's the reality that we see. We see more data available than has ever been available before to the folks that actually keep these operations running. We see that it takes more and more time to probably reach out to all of these different disaggregated systems and try to pull that data together. And then just like any of us, because we're human, our ability to contextualize that data and synthesize that data and extract insights from that data, we're all constrained by our own capabilities. And where AI comes in is that it's able to synthesize that data far more quickly and far more effectively than any one of us would be able to do with a desktop computer and an Excel spreadsheet. So, we think about the role of AI here in amplifying the knowledge and the judgment that these workers and these teams, regardless of what kind of manufacturing or industrial site that you're at, it's about amplifying them and allowing them to do more with that expertise and that judgment than they would have been able to do beforehand. AI for AI's sake, we're not interested in that. It's more about AI for solving the specific problems that our customers are coming to us to help them solve. And that's what gets us really excited, and that's how we've oriented the business.
And it would be brilliant to try and kind of unpack that a bit. Maybe use some examples without breaching confidence or particular pieces of work. But I mean, the industry, as we said early on, it's adopted machine learning for years around predictive
Sure.
mean time between failure and things like that. But moving beyond that, what
Yep.
are the kind of things that you're getting in the midst of delivering now that are very
Yep.
much kind of practical use cases to exploit that data?
I'm going to use an analogy like a car as an example, right? So we all drive cars. We all have plenty of experience there. And inside the car, you have a check engine light, and the check engine light has been around for decades. And the check engine light is picking up on different sensing across the engine or the mechanics of the vehicle. That's basically saying, hey, there's something here that you should probably take a look at and go bring it to a professional so that they can go and investigate a little bit further. I would argue that historically, over the last X number of years, not all, but a lot of the technology that might fall into the bucket that you're talking about looks a lot like a check engine light, right? There's a signal here, be mindful of it, but go figure it out. And I think that that's only maybe the first step or part of the problem that technology and AI can now actually help folks on the shop floor solve. And the difference now is that if you're only looking at machine data alone, or you're only looking at historian data alone, or MES data alone, you're missing the opportunity to pick up on all of the different trends that exist across all those different data sets. So I'll use the check engine light again as an example. Rather than just saying that there's something wrong with this vehicle, imagine if the check engine light also spit out on the screen in front of you, there's something wrong with this vehicle. We think it's at this particular part. These are the specific components you're going to want to investigate. And these are the recommendations that we think we would place forward to you as the expert, the mechanic, the operator, whatever, in order to resolve this in a reasonable period of time. Or maybe even going one step further, think about it as maybe you drive an electric vehicle and you say to the electric vehicle, I need to get 350 miles of range here on this current charge. Help me understand as I'm driving from here to there how I have to operate this vehicle in order to hit that 350 miles of range. It takes the signal and then it goes one step further and incorporates all of this other data out there and it looks for the connections in this really sophisticated context layer, contextual layer to help operators make better decisions. And I think the car analogy is a good one because it's a mechanical instrument that we're all engaging with day to day, and it's something we can really tangibly understand. And you can kind of draw a natural extension, I think, to the shop floor too.
And what I find really weird is that I have got an electric car and I do always try and get about 350 out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
So,
So,
so
but imagine if you were solving for like 340 and there are like little bits and little tweaks you can make along the way. That last 10 miles means the difference between like you got to pull over and go find like a Tesla supercharging station, or you actually get to your destination and you met your own expectations. You get to spend time with the people you're trying to spend time with. But point is, those tweaks, those 2, 3, 4, 5% increases in yield or reductions in unplanned downtime or capturing more energy efficiency, like that's night and day difference when it comes to plant level profitability and throughput. And we think about it as we're providing solutions to customers so that they can best serve their customers, and that's a better customer experience for them. And in the world of manufacturing and industry and energy, oil and gas, et cetera, those customers are all of us. These are what we love at Augury is that our customers are making things that all of us are using every single day, and want an opportunity to kind of marry AI up against some of the most fundamental parts of our economy, frankly.
there's a few things that I think of in response to that that would be good to explore. One of them is the point about data. As you say,
Mhm.
so much data. I imagine so many sensors picking up so much data. There are those in the industry who are very much firmly get all your data sorted, get it right, then do something. There are those of us that might have a kind of view that says, well, actually, just start with some great data and build from that. What are you finding works in your environment? Because there's a mass of data. I could imagine you could spend an eternity trying to make it perfect.
Yeah, so I think the data is going to be collected one way or the other. Like I think most sites around the world, even when you show up in some of the systems are legacy systems, I feel at times like some systems are still running on Windows 95 or Windows or NT, or it even looks like DOS screens from time to time. But there's a lot of data being collected. I think the short answer to your question is that it really does depend upon the customer and the use case and the problem that they're trying to solve. I don't think the answer for everyone is to ingest 100% of the data sources across all of their lines, because that's not what customers are necessarily coming to us for. I think most sites are going to have 2 or 3 or 4 common problems that continue to negatively impact their own KPIs. And they're looking to us as potentially one of a handful of solution providers that can help them actually fix that. right? And then from there, when we think about the actual production problem or operational problem, we can work backwards and ask the question of what are the most critical data sets that we can incorporate and ingest and surface to the user to help them get to a better answer. That local customization, I think, is really important. It's very easy for us to incorporate into all these different data sources from afar. I think one of the things that's going to make Augury's model very differentiated in the eyes of customers and users is we're actually going to physically place some engineers on site to sit shoulder to shoulder right next to the operators and understand how to customize those workloads and the way that the data is actually being ingested to meet the needs of the operators. And that's a big point of distinction for us.
And I'm guessing, I mean, to go back to an IT environment, we'll be talking about APIs or MCP connectors to gain access. In an
Yep.
OT space, I'm guessing that that's not quite as simple. That depends on the age of kind of equipment, depends on ability to integrate interface. What are you seeing there in terms of the ease of getting access to some of that data?
Again, I'll give you a couple of different extreme examples, and it really does depend on the customer. So I was on a call this week with one of our customers, and they were actually walking us through how they've developed MCPs, and they have kind of re-architected some of their own operations, built on top of one of the common foundation models. And they were really proud of this, very rightfully, and we commended them on the call for being so forward thinking with AI and agentic AI. And they were really excited to partner with Augury because in that case, Augury for them becomes a data source. And they've been thinking about this for at least a year and a half to 2 years. So they're very much at the front of the pack. There's other examples where you show up at customer sites and their concern is they don't even know where to start. When you have, in our case, some customers that maybe it's two, three, four site manufacturers that don't have the financial capacity or margin to be able to support large IT teams or development teams, they might be a little bit further behind. If you're working with large Fortune 100, Fortune 500 customers, as we do, they often have the ability to kind of reach back and pull on the resources of a digital team or an AI team, in which case they tend to be a little bit further ahead. Now, it's funny and it's a little counterintuitive. The smaller customers, even though they're a little bit further behind, could also be more nimble. They can make a decision and execute on it. The larger customers, they have more resources and more capital to put against many of these priorities, but getting that site level alignment is often very challenging, right? Because sometimes that relationship between corporate and the individual sites, it takes a lot of time to get things done that have been pushed down from the corporate level. So, point is, we train our team, we trade our sales engineers, our sellers, our product folks to really get in there and be with the customer and understand the specific constraints that that customer and that site are feeling. And we'll be flexible. We can meet the customer where they are, and we could meet just about any one of those individual requirements that they have. And I think for us, again, and nearly 1,000 sites around the world, hundreds of customers over our lifetime, I think we've seen just about all of it and know how to flex to meet them.
Which probably is a similar answer to if I explore ROI, the reasons why people are doing this, organizations.
Mhm.
Are you seeing any differences between your customers in the US, for example, versus Asia or Europe? Is it about productivity, cost per item, elapsed time to build? Is it
Yeah.
about growth? I mean, what are the core reasons why organizations are adopting this?
We went through an exercise. It's a great question, by the way. We went through an exercise over the last couple of years about really how we think about ascribing value for solutions that have to do with sensing or AI or whatnot. Because it's really important if you're going to make an investment as a manufacturer in Augury, we need to be able to really articulate ROI. And we've had this third party verified by analysts before, and we've done a lot of our own math and our calculations alongside our customers. Augury ROI could be anywhere from 3 to 15. And in one extreme case, there's a particular line. We received 40 times ROI given where they started and what the Augury impact was able to be. We went through the exercise. We actually ended up ascribing, I think, 35 different factors that could play into a user or a customer's definition of ROI. Or value rather, and really a couple of different examples of that. You can ascribe value to things like increased yield, or reductions in unplanned downtime, or reductions in energy consumption, or maybe you don't want to pay as much third-party labor or overtime labor, or you want to reduce the amount of cost for maintaining spare parts on site because your machines are break. You put all of these different things together, and one of the most important things that we have to do early on is match our definition of value to how the customer thinks about value. I would say that the long-term relationships between Augury and its clients that we've done the best at has been when we've had a very clear definition of value and ROI from the very beginning. I think maybe some of the places where there has been a little bit more friction is maybe the definition of value either changes or it wasn't clearly defined at the beginning, or maybe there's a different leadership regime that comes in on the customer side and has a different definition of it, or maybe the market changed around us, right? It's one thing to have a definition of value when you're a site that's running, 3 shifts and demand is through the roof, in which case you might have value really might be predicated upon things like reducing time between failures or reducing unplanned downtime. If demand drops and you go from 3 shifts to 2 shifts, it might be all about yield, right? So the definition can also change, and we have to be flexible enough to meet those customers too.
It'd be really interesting for listeners, I imagine, to understand a bit more about your approach. And I think by that, do I mean the type of models or the whether you embed those models in well, I talk about harnesses, but I'm not a great fan of the word. So thinking about how you deploy agentic solutions
Mhm.
without necessarily going into the detail of kind of exactly
Sure.
the tech stack, etc. But
Yeah.
what's your philosophy around the work that you do, and how broad is that, or indeed focused on particular singular approach?
Yeah, it's a great question, and when I think about kind of our legacy offering, one of the things that really set Augury apart in our machine health category specifically, right, which is sort of around putting those sensors on machines and really driving those predictive maintenance programs, across a billion machine hours of operating data that we've collected over the last 10 plus years, we have built some of our own historically really sophisticated models to pick up on anomalies and do that better than just about anybody out in the market. Now, that started years ago, and now because of some of these foundation models, right, the likes of Anthropic and Gemini and OpenAI, et cetera, there's a lot of inherent and embedded capability inside those models. And I think when we consider the industrial AI workforce today, which is really how we've re-architected the business and what our strategy looks like going forward to solve problems for specific industrial personas, as was sort of indicated in a press release that we put out earlier this year when we announced the industrial AI workforce. We're building that on top of in a partnership with Google Gemini. There's a tremendous amount of embedded capability in Gemini today that I think even just a couple of years ago we wouldn't have necessarily thought about.
I think one of the areas that I'd be fascinated on. I mean, I could almost imagine you creating a series of expert agents or agentic teams that are
Mhm.
accumulating knowledge around particular devices, OT equipment, particular types of robot within those environments, such that you embed that kind of know-how that's across customer organizations, your own
Sure.
organization, that creates a sustainable knowledge base for the future. And
Yep.
it's one of the patterns that I see time and time again in the conversations I have. People with decades of experience retiring and leaving a workforce and not being able to necessarily capture that know-how because the working patterns of the next generations are not necessarily the working patterns of the previous ones.
Totally.
Is that part of what you're describing there? It's
Oh yeah.
building that sustained capacity.
Yeah, I'll attack them from a couple angles. So one angle is absolutely, as every one of these iterations, right, between like an expert on the floor, a worker on the floor, engaging with one of these agents, all of those queries and the feedback on those queries makes the underlying kind of context graph or context layer better and smarter, right? Just like with each additional hour or 1,000 hours or million hours of machine data that we collect, feeding through our models are becoming more and more sophisticated and more accurate. And we actually have a whole host of other customer-facing product under development right now that's intended to do, Rob, like exactly that, which is how do you not just accumulate, foundational model or manuals rather, and decision trees and reporting lines, but like what we're more interested in is how do you sort of accumulate all of that historical judgment that has been used to keep the lights on at those factories so that somebody new after a reasonable ramp time of a couple of weeks or a couple of months can benefit from decades of the person who was in that seat before them making great decisions on their employer's behalf. We actually think that we have an incredible role to play in that and an opportunity to do that now. And there really isn't anything else out on the market that's providing that kind of a solution. And we're really excited about that. So much more to come there. But I think the problem that you're identifying is a real one, and we're attacking that pretty hard.
One of my previous guests on the podcast quite a few ago said, I'm doing it to make my people incredible. And it's that kind of point around accelerated pathways to expertise by being able to hook into that knowledge of those before in that sense.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that's exactly right. Like, as we said before, yeah. As we said before, it's you start with the person, you start with the expert, and then work backward. AI for AI's sake is not going to get any customer further forward than they were before.
I'm really interested in sticking with that people point as well, which is adoption. Look, I don't think I've seen anywhere where everybody has absolutely embraced from day one the solutions that have been put on the ground. So it'd be great to kind of understand some of the maybe lessons learned from the work that your teams have been doing to help drive motivation on the ground
Mhm.
to not only embrace and adopt, but to truly make a difference to the way that they are working. What would you highlight as kind of to share for others about to start that process, perhaps?
Yeah, there's several things that come to mind. So I think the first is we have to do, and I say we, and I'm referencing not just Augury, but really any solution provider in the AI space, or especially in the industrial AI space. You have to take the time to get beyond just sort of AI coming in to quote unquote save the day, right? AI is a tool like anything else. The internet isn't going to come and save the customer. Software is not going to come and save the customer. You have to take the time to really distill that down to the specific problems that it's intended to try and solve. And you need to make sure that that's not just understood at the customer. By what I mean by that is, some CXO or VP of operations or manufacturing, et cetera, or chief digital officer, whomever. You need to make sure that it's understood by the users because they're the ones that you're actually going to be measuring most of your engagement from. So take the time to make those messages clear. I think the second is in order to do that at a user level, you have to get on site. For an AI forward company that's really at the cutting edge of industrial AI solutions, we have a lot of people whose job is to get on airplanes and go on site, put on their helmets and put on their steel-toed boots and walk the lines because those lines aren't going anywhere, and take the time to really create the followership and train and enable at the ground level. That is critical. I don't know if everyone embraces that same philosophy, but for us, I couldn't imagine operating the company any differently than that. And then I think thirdly, our founder has said this in the very beginning, and I couldn't agree with it more, which is at the end of the day, like you're not selling a sensor solution or an AI solution. You're really selling trust, and trust comes from outcomes or expectations that have been met or exceeded several times in a row, leaving the user or the plant side, et cetera, better off than before. Those first 30, 60, 90 days alongside a new customer are critical. They have to believe that the things that you're surfacing to them are going to leave them better than if they decided to ignore the alert or ignore the opportunity to go and inquire with an AI agent. They have to believe it's going to leave them better off. And it's our job to show them that, not just tell them that, but show them that. And I have confidence that the team that we have in place here at Augury will be able to do that.
I think that, I mean, that opens up a kind of fascinating area around the way in which people actually interact with that solution or that data, because I'm guessing that somebody on the floor kind of just needs the information presented to them really easily at the point of need, not wanting to know kind of the detail of how it got to that conclusion or why but to trust it, as you say, there needs to be something which might be different from somebody in a testing phase of a product who's kind of in the midst of the architecture and wanting to see evaluation reports or quality kind of tests and things like that. How do you think about the user experience differently, not only dependent on role, but dependent on stage of implementation as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's reasonable to believe that there's going to be more skepticism at the beginning. I think we're not the first company to create solutions in this space. Now, I think one of the things that really creates a competitive advantage for us is that Augury has been in the hands of users, subject matter experts on the factory floor now for years on the reliability side of things, which means that we already have like a reasonable baseline of trust that if Augury creates something and says that this is going to help your plant operate better, we get the benefit of the doubt, which is a huge competitive advantage. We need to protect that. But I think you need to kind of bring people through that journey of some initial skepticism and train and enable and show them. I think you need to trust. That's exactly right. But you also have to verify at the beginning. And if you're a user, you can imagine if you're verifying that what's being displayed to you 9, 10, 12, 15, 20 times, it's actually accurate or most of the way there, you're going to inherently trust it a bit more as time goes on than otherwise. Now, again, these tools are not intended to replace that person and their judgment. I think it's intended to accelerate that person's ability to use their judgment to make the right decision. Um, so I think that if we can help users collect those wins, log those wins, and then communicate some of those wins, there's nothing more powerful than kind of like when that culture in any company, right, or especially in any plant, the culture carrier that's been there for years knows every nut, bolt, screw, machine, input, whatever, like the back of their hand. When they're able to actually get up in front of their peers and say, "No, this actually works as it says it does," like that's more powerful than any piece of marketing collateral or sales collateral or proof source. That is the most powerful proof source you can have. It's somebody who carries a lot of weight on site saying, "This is something that I trust and I'm going to use."
And I guess your point earlier around having people on the ground helping, watching, assisting, answering builds trust. But
Oh
actually, this
yeah.
build this kind of huge presence and knowledge about what other use cases could be relevant in that environment. So yes, it must be great around embedding the things that you're doing, but it must also kind of identify the next set of improvements that can be made.
For 100%. That's exactly right. I mean, as a business, we started with reliability and built trust and repetition and subject matter expertise there. Being on site and really understanding the reliability use case, we realized that it really is like the long pole in the tent. Like that is the thing that needs to be solved, and that's where there's a lot of pain for customers, no doubt. That's something that'll bring a site hard down. But then when you make the jump over to the operations side, the operations departments and teams, that is a far larger opportunity set because every single line and decision and workflow has the opportunity to be optimized by pulling in all of that data. So I think being on site was what opened our eyes up to just how big of an opportunity the operations side was. And when you have your users, and that could be the physical workers on the floor, it could be the plant superintendent, the line leads, et cetera. When they come to us and they're like, well, can you help us out here and here? And here's this other problem. Do you have a solution for that? If you listen to your customers are going to tell you what the next thing is that you should be building. I think Augury has done a fantastic job in its history listening to its customers, and I think now our roadmap has really kept up and reflects that. So
Cool. And I'm glad you mentioned the word roadmap because I mean, the world is kind of innovating at a massive pace. And I'm sure that anyone delivering solutions in this market will always be thinking about the things that need to come next. What are you most excited about that's coming for the rest of the year? And not
yeah,
necessarily the things that you're doing, that although that could be that, but equally
sure.
the things that are coming in the market that enable you to do even more as well.
I'm excited about being able to sit. I'm actually going to be on the road next week with a bunch of customers for several days, and I'm really excited for meetings like that over the next several months, where we get to stand in front of the customers and say, we have a solution to help you listen to every single one of your machines in the factory floor. We're going to be a heck of a lot closer to that statement over the next couple of months than we have been over the last couple of months. So that's one big push. And I think the second big push is rather than having agentic solutions that we can put into the hands of some workers, we're going to have agentic solutions that can be put into the hands of all workers. So when you sort of think about that from a customer standpoint or a plant superintendent standpoint, knowing that there's a single solution provider that can do all of those things for you and do them with a high degree of trust and fidelity, um, that's a game changer. And we really wake up and get excited about the question of like, what does it take for us to show up in the eyes of existing customers and prospective customers with the mentality of like, let's do more, let's do more, let's do more. And then you start to kind of narrow that problem set that's left. And then you're a trusted partner and customers can build for the future with you. So that's what gets me really excited.
One of the conversations that inevitably goes hand in hand with AI is always the threat, and threat can take many different forms. But certainly hooking into operational equipment, and especially in those sectors that are higher risk, if you kind of
Mhm.
like, in the context of the things that are being built. I'm guessing that certainly cyber and protecting access to everything that you're doing is critical. Could you just talk
Yep.
a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, security is paramount both for at the OT level and in the cloud. Where that's a question that we get frequently from customers about how we host, where data is transmitted. We have a great set of answers and solutions for exactly that. That's usually one of the first two to three things we end up talking about in early conversations with customers. When I think about your point on like dangerous environments, hazardous environments, et cetera. Again, we actually believe that the chance, that really the opportunity is for those experts, those workers that are sitting in the dangerous site or the hazardous site, the chance of them making decisions to operate that site best, most safely, most effectively, is going to come with meaningfully more data available in their fingertips versus having to make decisions under duress in tight timetables with some of the information available. Maybe someday in the future, agentic AI generally information sources get to a point where they could drive some of the controls of the machines themselves, maybe in some of those environments. But the truth is, for now, in the medium term, you're still going to very much see humans and experts and that judgment being at the forefront. They're the ones who kind of have to have their hands on the controls for the time being.
And I think to finish, I mean, and the reason I asked that question is, look, there's huge positives around adoption and doing something because it's right to do something. Organizations have to always continually innovate, search for the thing that gives them differentiation. Yes, there
Yep.
are threats. What would you say to anybody listening who maybe hasn't yet adopted some of the things that we might look at today and think, yeah, they have the potential to kind of change the game for those organizations, but they may
Yep.
not be yet mature because it is changing at such a fast pace. It's it's
Totally.
it's really a question around how do people put a toe in the water to actually test out something?
Yeah. You said it perfectly. You put a toe in the water. You do one thing. You try one thing. And I would don't start with which AI tool should I deploy. Start with which problem do I need to solve. And if you can get your team together, your leads together, and identify one problem that is predominantly a data problem, and you can align that that's one problem where everyone is going to hold hands and be focused on trying to solve together, then there's any number of different solution providers out in the world that can get you from 0 to 1. I don't think that the decision to be AI native or not AI native is a black and white thing. I think that there's a lot of confusing stuff written about this out in the world right now. And the truth is, think about AI and the tools that are powered by AI as a lever that is available to help plants and plant operators operate their facilities most effectively. And then once you've solved that problem and you've created confidence in your team that AI helped you get there faster and more effectively than without it, then go find another one and another one. But do it at the pace that your organization is able to adopt it. Don't do it just because, and don't do it because someone sitting in an office somewhere says you have to have an AI strategy. It should be thinking about how do you solve problems more effectively as a team in a plant. And that's the first place that you need to be aligned.
Ilan, it's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast and thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's nice to meet you.